Juggling life as a mom. We're working out some kinks. Okay, people? I do hair. All right? I'm learning how to do all of this stuff. And that's okay. Here we go. Who's ready? Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Bless Your Heart podcast. I'm your host, Laura Hartnett. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about just juggling life as a mom and a working mom and just having your own sense of self. I think that it's so important for you to be able to differentiate each role. I think that that is the moral of the story, is to understand that you're a makeup of all different roles, and you have to make sure that you're taking your time for each one and really being able to separate those out. Prioritize them, of course. Like for me, obviously it's faith, family, and then my career. But understanding also that sometimes it might look like your career is prioritized higher than your family at some things because it supports the family. You really can't disconnect any of those as well. They're all tethered together. You know, they're not just complete separate entities, but they're all tethered together to, basically work together in order to form, many parts, all one body. So they're the things that make up your life. And so if you're realizing that one of them's kind of been starved a little bit, then you might find yourself really needing to focus on that a little bit more and to build that part of your identity a little bit better. So what I mean by that is, after I got divorced, I really felt, there's two identities that really had to be ship-shaped and molded into something a little bit stronger. And that was my career, finances. I wasn't making near the kind of money that I needed to make. I was still learning how to even work in the real world. And now I was, juggling that and just doing that part-time to where not only is it full-time, it's business. I mean, it means we mean business. So, then you tack on the fact it was a pandemic. It was we mean double business. So this was things no one has ever even seen before. So, there was a huge learning curve there. And then on top of it, I was also trying to rebuild myself and who I was. And so one thing I will say, I feel like I did it okay. I think it's sometimes you do need to pat yourself on the back whenever you do have a win. And I feel like under the circumstances, as hard as it was to try to navigate through that, that was such a crazy time in my life. I didn't know which way was north at that point. All the things, life and disappointments are all relative to your expectations. And so at the time, my expectations were one way. And then once we opened and it was oh, no, actually you're shut down. And I wasn't just trying to provide for my family and didn't have just the stress of that. Now I had the overhead of this business too. It was a real brick and mortar business. So it wasn't just, here you got to just have the overhead of 5 kids, which is already a huge undertaking. And I received child support, but I didn't get spousal support. That's a whole nother side note, that we don't have to go into right now. But yeah, I was at that point not making enough money to provide for my kids the way that I felt like they needed and what they could fit into. But yet I still had to have the availability of a person that worked a part-time job. And yet I didn't have any workers at the time. It was a crazy, crazy time. At that point, after 3 years of battling custody battles, my ex did win. And I will say he won because that's not what I wanted. I wanted full custody. And I wanted to be the primary parent. But he did win 50-50. I think in the court system too, not many... I hate to say this, but this is just, again, my perspective and my view of it is, I feel like if a man stands up and says he wants 50-50, I don't actually agree with the fact that that should just be an automatic given, because even though I was told, by the judge that that was for the best interests of the children, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, is that the children, what's best for them is stability and consistency. And so I wanted to keep the consistency of the way that they were being raised. And that was with me as a primary parent. And I think a lot of judges will see it that way. But for whatever reason, she saw him as wanting to step up and be more present, I guess, in their lives as a 50-50 parent. And she viewed it differently. I can't say why, because I can't, judge her intention, because I don't know it. It didn't make any sense to me. So unfortunately, that is what happened, and it caused a huge shakeup in our family, in my opinion. And, I feel like I do have a right to not just state my opinion, but it's backed up by now I feel like years of really understanding cognitive development of children and why it is so important, especially at a time where your family's being split apart, why it is so important for there to be that stability there. So I think that you should definitely, if there's 50-50 already kind of happening, then I don't think you should change it to one being the primary. And I think that if there's a primary parent, then I think for the kids' sake, you need to keep it as primary. So that's my little side note tangent. And I feel very passionate about that. But, going back to at that point, I had to really make sure that my kids were also adjusting well. And so I had to somehow figure out, okay, as much as priority is a work so I can take care of them, whenever it's time for me to work, I try to maximize my value at work. If that meant for me going to classes, again, educating myself, going to classes and learning like all these different techniques, like I wanted to make sure that my hourly amount, like my hourly value was at the highest it could be. I didn't want to be a volume hairstylist. I wanted to be a value hairstylist, and I wanted to build my value. So I just went out there and said, okay, well, what are the highest ticket items that you can do in hair? And it was extensions. And so I was like, I'm not going to be just, a hairstylist. I'm going to be an extension expert, and I'm going to back that up with tons of education. I'm not just going to market that, because if you market that, you better be able to back it up, especially if you're charging a certain amount, because then, get ready for the reviews and bad reviews to roll in. So I wanted, to be ethical about it. And so if I was going to be a certain colorist or a certain specialist, in order to justify charging certain, prices, then I had to make sure I educated myself and backed it up. Luckily, I could write that off. So I was able to do, it was kind of fun, at times, like whenever I didn't have the kids, because of 50-50, I tried to kind of mend together two of my favorite things, which was educating myself and learning how to better my value, but also having a little fun and going on a trip. And so I found classes that were in cities that I always wanted to go to, like LA. And so I would fly out to LA, and honestly, that's where a lot of the, innovators are. And on the East and West Coast, that's where the trends kind of start. And so I was like, well, I also want to be one of the first to know about new trends that are coming out. Like, it's my responsibility as a salon entrepreneur to know what all this stuff is. So I went ahead and I just made fun of the whole situation, and I would book a trip, and I made sure to get a credit card that was for my business, that I could also gain points, travel points for, because that was something that I really wanted to do. I feel like when having young kids, when the courts finalized that it was 50-50, it was devastating for me. It was devastating, but at some point I had to just go, okay, these are the cards I'm dealt. So how do I play them as best as possible? And so how do I, and since I'm not a primary, that means that when I don't have my kids, I have the ability to take care of the other roles in my life. And that was my business and myself. And so I really tried to capitalize in that week I didn't have them, because it was a week on, week off. That's what we've been doing. So I really tried to capitalize on making sure during those times to really focus in on building my career. And, you know, I would also still, I mean, it wasn't like I never was there for the kids during that time too. Let me be like completely, real about that. Like I always blocked my schedule still. I was like, okay, I got football games. I got, basketball games. I got dance recitals to go to. And all of my clients just knew, and they respected the fact that that was my most important thing. And that was the kind of clientele that I built as well, is somebody who understands that, because I just wanted to make sure that I was supported also by my clients in that way. So, I during that time just started kind of learning kind of how to silver lining all of this and build my career during those times and maximize it. I mean, even during this podcast, like making this podcast, I do a lot of this the weeks that my kids are gone. And so now I was able to even do the podcast because I'm able to grow the salon to a certain degree that now I can kind of like, take a step back a little bit from behind the chair to grow other parts of myself and my business and different dreams and goals that I have. So it's just been like a building process. And so you have to understand that too. When juggling as a mom, there's seasons of motherhood too. And there's some seasons where you're going to be required to do a lot more of one role. It is not equally balanced. I think that that's such a misunderstood idea, is that it's like a triangle and it's like you can like each side is perfectly, what is that, an equilateral triangle where it's like each side is perfectly angled and and everything's completely well balanced and you can twist it and it would still look the same. No, it is not like that. Motherhood is not like that. It is very different in that sometimes it's going to be longer on one and it's going to be shorter on another. What is that? Isosceles? It is, going to be a very heavy role, much of your time spent in mothering because you have young children. During the younger stage, it's going to be about really strategically and intentionally setting that time aside, especially if you're married and you're, the primary caregiver to your child. You're going to be, really pushed to do a lot of mothering and educating and doing all of that, while they're that age. But then you can't be completely depleted. Like you have to find little ways and you have to talk with your partner if you do have one and say, okay, I need to carve out this time for myself. And if you're a single mom and you have no one that's out there helping you, make time even virtually with friends, and then eventually, find somebody you trust to maybe take over and watch the kids while you go get your hair done or you go do something for yourself. It is so important to have that and just to have those moments to look forward to, because I needed those moments so much in order to survive this. And it's been, ebbs and flow of when I could grow myself and I could grow my career. And then other times I had to really, do other things. And then there are certain times where I had moments, luckily, honestly, I really was very fortunate that the time I did get divorced was kind of during the stages where the kids were a little bit more independent, and I think that was just a godsend, because then I was able to, start growing this career where they didn't need me as much. And then now I'm seeing them need me a little bit more because now they're about to launch into real life and we're going through like the final stage of, adolescence where we're having to really understand, okay, like you're going out into the world and making some really big choices for yourself now. And I'm sitting back a little bit and allowing them to make those, but yet they still need your parental guidance and coaching, to kind of sit with those emotions and how to process them and make sure they have a really solid foundation so that whenever they go out into the world, they recreate that and they have your voice in their head, and they can kind of go, yeah, mom would say this, I'm going to do this. And this makes sense, to me, the reason why, and because she explained it. So it takes time to do all of those things. So you do have to make sure that, you're always kind of aware of what the needs are in your family and understand that it's not going to be perfectly balanced. I listened to this one entrepreneur that I thought was so interesting because they talk about, you hear all the time about how to live this well-balanced life. And when I say well-balanced, I think it means differently than I think what a lot of people mean. I don't mean equal, like as in all things are equal, kind of like what I had said earlier. I feel like it's just paying attention and having awareness that these are all roles you play and these are all needs of yours, but not that they all need to be equally attended to and with the same amount of time or energy or effort. Some of those roles will come more naturally and some need to be worked on a little bit more. Thus, they would need more time to be developed. So I think just having awareness of that. Also, just living an entrepreneurial life, this guy had said, and I was just like, okay, this is exactly what I thought, because I was like, there are moments in my life where I have a very unbalanced life. Like it is unbalanced in a lot of ways. Like right now, for instance, because I'm growing my career and I'm growing, my family and making sure that they're taken care of. There's parts of me that have kind of taken a back seat, which I have noticed, like I need to step it up a little bit and, maybe talk to somebody or, just kind of like, make sure I'm still taking the time to educate myself on just my own needs and my own wants and carving out time. I'm going to be turning 40 this year. And I was like, I'm making sure I have to put some boundaries in place financially around even my kids' wants and needs, because I would like to do something to celebrate my 40th birthday and do like a trip of a place that I've always wanted to go. I wanted to get my passport and I was like, it has my maiden name on it again. And I was like, I want to be able to use that. And whenever I got my passport, they were like, all right, any trips planned? I was like, well, not yet, but I'm going to, because that's something I really wanted to do, is just explore a little bit more of the world. Again, my curious nature. So, but, I feel like, it's important for me to put up those boundaries, but understand that, okay, this one's a little bit weighted too heavy and this one's a little depleted this side. So I want to fill that back up. I have a little bit of a different take. I love like the love language book. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. And I do follow a lot of that. And I do think like people have certain languages, love languages that they kind of adhere to. They say it's a little bit based on like your childhood trauma and things like that, which I find is very fascinating. But I remember going to therapy, our marriage therapist, and he said, okay, Laura, what's your love language? And I was like, well, I'm multilingual because I have all of them. And I think that's it. Like and for me, some were like, they all needed to be tended to, but not at the same time and not all at, with the same amount of effort. But at sometimes, like I would like to receive gifts. That's not my primary love language. And it's not the one that is always to be focused on, but it does exist, and so it really, what it all comes down to is to have like a healthy relationship with somebody, you have to have invested in getting to know them and understanding them, and they're constantly evolving. So you're constantly having to continue to get to know them, and as they evolve and stay connected. And I think that that's the beautiful thing about relationships, how they say it takes work, is because it takes constant effort. And I think that that's just you as a person in all these roles that you play, whether you're the working mom or the stay-at-home mom, or not even a mom at all. And in, whatever it is that you choose, roles you choose to play, there's definitely sub-roles in there that you have to focus on. So to help me, one of the things that I will say is consistent between each of those roles, it doesn't matter which hat you put on, nutrition is going to be well, played out in each of those. You have to be healthy. You have to make sure that you're maintaining health. So for me, number one is spirituality. I believe I have a very strong centered faith. It wasn't always like that. It was because I didn't have that at times. Like I grew up with a strong faith, and then through the course of my divorce, I really left. And, cause I was just like, well, you know what? I don't know if I believe all this. Like, this is kind of crazy. I did it the right way. You know, I got married and I saved myself for my husband and one person, and I did it all by the book, and look where that turned out, so I was just kind of fled from the whole ideology. And then I returned because I realized, like, yep, that is actually a very strong foundational thing that I need. And so the strongest. So I make sure that now to be spiritually fed. I think that if you're not spiritually fed, then you're emotionally led. And I think your emotions can be the worst teachers. I think like your emotions can be such liars. They play a part in understanding, maybe signaling to you certain truths that you need to know about. However, they also can lie to you. So I like to stay with the value system that I adhere to when my emotions are really taking me awry. So that's number one that you need throughout any role that you're playing while you're juggling. Number two is nutrition, like I said, and food and eating healthy and making sure you're drinking enough water. If you're a mom, I really encourage all moms to take a DHA supplement, like amino acids, fish oil, something of that nature, because our diets just aren't really good with omega vitamins for just replenishing all the brain vitamins that we lose. Like the baby takes so much of that, and so we get like this brain fog, and we get all of this because like we're depleted of it. I think a lot of times I read a study about how brain fog and postpartum depression is really caused by omega deficiencies sometimes, and certain electrolytes and potassium and magnesium deficiencies. And so it's like there's a lot that can be said just to make sure that you're maintaining your health in that way. Exercising, again, this fluctuated for me. I used to be a everyday like hour to 2 hour girl whenever I was more of a stay-at-home mom, because I would take my kids to the gym and they were happy playing in the play place. I had a really, really cool play place, so they were happy. I was happy because I got a moment just to like hang out with my friends and work out and do that. I used to be an athlete, so that was really important that I maintained some level of, physique and energy and all of that. And it kept me goal-centered and feeling good about myself. But that then totally took like a nosedive whenever I was going through this huge change and was just on my feet sometimes 12 hours a day. And it was like, I can't work out and work 12 hours a day. Like that was just too much for me. And I think I'm being a highly sensitive person. I take on a lot whenever I'm entering environments. And so it depletes me even more physically. So I had to really make some, small changes. There's different apps on your phone that you can even do like 10-minute workouts. And then sometimes I just take a break and I say, you know what, I can't do it today, and that's okay. But just try, like I still do bar because I feel like that's more low impact and it doesn't take as much energy out of me. And it's still really good for my joints, for my bones. It's good for a woman's body. So I do try to go and do that here and there. I have a membership and try to do that. So, you'll develop friendships. So not only does it, serve you, which serves everybody, it's you're a whole oxygen mask first kind of idea. Like I do believe in that, but sometimes it's not quite that cut, dry cut, sometimes it's going to look a little bit like you're really giving of yourself, because that's what's required for you at that time. Just check in with yourself and make sure that you don't let it go too far, too long. And you don't start developing a habit of that, and you're setting up, sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to make these habitual changes. And, I had to work harder before, setting up this life before I could take a breather and go, okay, that was worth it. Now I can like take a seat back and I can rest a little bit and I can enjoy like the fruits of your labor, So I think that's why it's important to make sure. I think one of the reasons why I was able to do that though too was because I was able to raise emotionally sound children, because I was so invested, and that was such a huge part of my role, and I really worked hard on that. And yeah, that meant I sacrificed a lot of my personal things because I made sure that this was really foundationally sound before I moved on to other things I wanted to do in my life. So, you reap what you sow. And so if there's something that's important to you, you have to understand that it's going to take a lot of effort. And if your career is important to you, it's going to take a lot of effort. However, if you really do focus on being a good mom and raising your children and really give them the tools that they need, they'll be more independent to where you can have those things for yourself again. Like, my kids have a strong sense of self, so they don't need me around as much. I mean, that is the goal, right? Is to raise them to be autonomous and to be able to take care of themselves so they can leave the nest and do well. So, at the beginning, set it off really strong, and know it's going to be a little bit it's like a new business, like you're in the infant stage of a business. You're like, you don't have a life. That's what this guy also said. He was like, everyone's like, live a well-balanced life. Well, when you have a new business, you do not have a balanced life. You are giving everything to that business, So luckily my kids were at a stage where I could. And then of course with the custody situation, I could as well. But, yeah, so that is my best advice on that subject, on balancing motherhood and just kind of having a realistic view of it. It's hard. It's hard. So just, understand that I totally validate you in that. It's not easy. And I think that's, sometimes I wish we didn't need to have this independence. I think it's a healthy thing. I tell my girls all the time, like, I'm not a feminist activist type girl. However, I will say that I'm really grateful for the fact that I didn't graduate college, but I did at least decide to get a degree or license in cosmetology, to where I could do something to be self-sufficient. I think it's really important for no matter what you do, for you always to have a way to make money. There's ways of doing it from home. There's really creative ways of doing that. And I think that for women, it's really important that you do always have that option, because, you just always want to be able to financially take care of yourself. I think that, I really put a lot of trust into my marriage, and thinking that I didn't have to develop that part of me as much, or even really have to work on that, because, the financial contribution part of my life, because I was mainly the caretaker, and I didn't realize how much power I had given up because of that. And I had almost was at one point trapped. And so it wasn't until I could financially be sound that I can have better stability and better options for myself. And it's just not a bad idea to always have those options for you. I'm not saying that you're going to use them, but I definitely teach my girls, like, I went in with full force and complete trust. And I'm sure that was a lot of naiveness, but you don't know sometimes what you don't know. And so you just have to protect yourself, and you have to make sure that you're always taking care of you, who, especially if you're introducing children into the mix, because they might one day depend on you, and they might need you in that way. And you just want to always have that in your back pocket no matter what. So we can also go over kind of some creative solutions to finances and things like that in another episode. That way I can kind of give you some practical advice and things like that of what I did and certain podcasts that I even listened to that help with finances, investments, and things like that. I am not your investment guru, by the way. I don't know stock market and things like that. That's one of my next bucket list educational items I want to attack and get to know better. I also bought a book on taxes. I want to become more tax sound and tax savvy, because I feel like that's just really useful. I think sometimes it's not about just how much money you bring in. It's also about how you spend it, and how much money you bring in and how much you do pay, like, I mean, just being tax savvy. There's people who bring in a lot of money, but they don't have to pay as much taxes as some people because they're just tax savvy and they're smart with that. Like I said, that was one way where I could kill two birds with one stone, which was, going and doing these courses that I wanted to do and places I've always wanted to go to. So it's like, boom, two birds, one stone. And so we'll talk about all of that too on later episodes. Until then, I guess we better wrap this one up, and I look forward to the next one. And be sure to reach out to me if you have any questions, concerns, comments. I'm always up for hearing about it. All right, everybody, have a good one. I'll see you next time.